Welcome to the headquarters of Fire Wisdom, supported by the Mikes of Montgomery and located in the beautiful community of Montgomery, lovely neighborhood, as part of Calgary. So again, welcome. My name's Mike, and I want to tell you a bit about the setup that I've got here. I have a video that I made 2 years ago, the first time I set up a fire pit out back here at the start of COVID, as basically a way of kind of pushing back against winter because there was nowhere to go and nothing to do. And it's evolved quite a bit since then, so I wanted to kind of bring you up to date. The link to the video is down below this video if you want to go and have a look at it. Sort of the rude beginnings of where things are at today. So let me start by just saying a little bit about Fire Wisdom. The Mikes of Montgomery include myself, Mike, and there's another Mike who's my downstairs neighbor. He has a suite in the basement of the house that I rent here from our landlord. So together it's the Mikes of Montgomery. No deep reason for that, it's just what we came up with. The concept of Fire Wisdom has evolved in at least my mind over the last couple of years. And basically what it arises from is something that is in your bones, you know this, having to do with how important fire is to us. And I don't mean us as individuals, I mean human beings as a species. We owe, for good or bad, the way we're living today in many ways, to fire. The obvious stuff is that fire provided us with a sense of security and warmth in the lovely winter weather that we have north of the 49th parallel here in Canada and elsewhere. But there's more to it than that. We owe fire a debt for our very evolution. You look at it simply in terms of the relative physical costs, ongoing costs associated with supporting the brain that we have, which is the advancement that sets us apart from many other species, if not most other species on the planet. And a big part of that we owe to fire. And I can give you all sorts of stuff to read if you're interested in that. Again, my email address is down below. You can ask me for that. But basically, the species that we were, if you like, competing with, so our fellow mammals, basically had to spend an awful lot of time and energy eating and chewing, quite literally. And by comparison to the way things used to be, human beings today spend about 35 minutes a day on average chewing food. Chimpanzees spend an average of 4.5 hours every day chewing food, and orangutans spend over 6.5 hours a day chewing food. What goes along with that are the complicated gut systems required to process that raw food that was eaten back in the day and currently by chimpanzees and orangutans. And by being able to cook our food, it's certainly a very strong argument made by evolutionary paleontologists, by being able to cook our food, we were able to pre-process it to the point where we didn't need the big gut, we didn't need to spend so much time and energy chewing our food, and as a consequence we could shift our internal resources to the development of our gray matter, our internal processing system, which gave us the evolutionary advantage, such as it might be, that we enjoy today. So Fire Wisdom comes from all of that. We owe a lot to fire. Now let me say just a little bit about the setup I've got here and kind of how it's changed over the years. You might be able to see a corner of the fire pit over there behind me. I'll put a closer picture of that up along with this video. But basically when I started 2 years ago, I had the same fire pit that I have now with a rudimentary kind of reflector system behind it, made up of some pieces of slate that I found lying down beside the garage from the previous owner. And this current model, which I've had for 2 years now, is much more advanced. It has a shaped metal back shield around behind it that reflects heat forward. Basically I just got sheets of metal from Princess Auto and shaped them manually, tied them together by drilling holes in it and knitting it up with baling wire. Bent the tops over so that the heat is reflected that way, and then built a little cap, and I'll show you a close-up of that, out of thinner sheet metal. And actually put a hole in the top of that and put a flue in, mainly to take some of the smoke away and kind of generally direct the smoke away from the seating area of the fire pit. So that's there in its current iteration now. 2 years ago I had nothing on this side, which meant that anything coming from the general south there in the way of wind and snow just blew right in, and it meant there's a lot of nights where I just didn't feel like coming out as a result of that. More recently, when the other Mike moved in and started joining at the fire, we needed something more here, so we put a tarp up, and it worked functionally. A little bit of cold air snuck in around it, but it did mean that we were able to keep most of the snow and wind away from us. It wasn't very aesthetically pleasing. It didn't work as well as it might. So it's time to come up with another design. So I spent a little while thinking and doodling about the design, and this is what I came up with. One of the things that I had to make sure was that the building of this had a minimal impact on the building and on the surrounding area, because I am a tenant, so I basically can't make big modifications here. And so this is all actually relatively simple. This whole structure is basically tacked to the house with one good-sized screw at the top, another one that I've added to a board that's embedded in a little bit of free space underneath the patio here. It's secured along the bottom. The bottom plate is a treated 1x6, and in a couple of places I drilled holes and put spikes through that I drove down between the cracks in the 2x2 cement block that makes up the patio here. The framing itself is 2x4 down low here. The panels basically are just the spaces in the 2x4 with 1x2 squares around, and then around those 1x2 squares I wrapped, you just see here kind of moving, pieces of tarp, and then fit them in and nailed them into place. So very light. On this end I attached a cross member and literally using twine tied it into the crabapple tree, so it's solid as a rock. The top is a piece of 1x12, so it works as a stand-up bar when the weather's nice enough that we want to have it open, and people can join us around the fire by standing along here. We may get some bar stools in the summer. We'll see how it goes. Now, of course, we don't want it open like this when it gets cold in the wintertime. And so what we've got are a series of panels that are basically lightweight construction, 2x4 on the bottom, 1x4s up the sides and across the top, and they're 4 panels, and they're tied together with piano hinges. The panels have the same 1x2s inside, but instead of tarp material, what I've got is marine vinyl. Marine vinyl is lovely stuff. You actually use it when you're doing covers on boats that are made out of canvas and things, but you want to have a window in them, and marine vinyl is just that. It's basically very, very clear plastic. It's not the stuff that you normally get at the local building supply place. You can get it online and a number of other locations. Again, if you want contacts for that, send me an email. I'll send it along. And so what we can do is open and close these at will, and I'll show you in a second kind of how that works. What I'll do is I'll close this up, show you how that works, then I'll reposition the camera so I can sit down inside the fire pit and can talk about some of the other things that have been added over the last couple of years to the Montgomery Fire Wisdom experience. Okay, so we want to close up. It's fairly easy to do. I say everything's hinged. The outside edge of the hinges, the biggest panel, are tied into a 2x4 screwed to the house wall that goes up on the far end there, and I'll just show you how it goes back together. Okay, we need to make a few adjustments in the spring because the things are a little tight, but you can see it all goes together. So now we've got marine vinyl panels and closed off. A little bit of snow blows in underneath, but not much at all. So keeps us protected on this side. So we've got just the one open side, the tarp up on top, house on front, back, and one side, and this on the other side. And so we've got lots of circulation for air for combustion purposes and breathing, but not a problem at all in terms of wind blowing in. From the other side, the neighbor's house is fairly close. It's an infill, not too many windows on that side, and it does a nice job of blocking the wind from that direction. So lovely outdoor setup for the Fire Wisdom headquarters. Okay, I'm going to reset and set up with the camera looking inside so I can talk to you a little bit about the inside of the fire pit. Okay, so welcome to the inside of the fire pit. I think I got the camera set up right by the bar that I showed you earlier. And I just want to say a little bit about the inside setup here, but first of all, I'm going to make myself comfortable. What we did was get rid of the plastic Adirondack chair that I was using previously, and I went and found, just on Kijiji, somebody who was selling some lovely, comfortable living room furniture at 20 bucks a chair. Got a couple of those, covered them with cheap tarps, the green tarps you see here, so they're weatherproof. There's a tarp up above here, of course, so that helps, but they work just fine and they're incredibly comfortable. Then line them with sleeping bags, so you can see I've got my sleeping bag laid out because the weather's been pretty good here the last little while, so I haven't had to take it inside. I've even got my gloves here when I need them, and I'm all set. So I'm going to sit down like that. Fire pit right out in front of me. This over here is a wood container that the other Mike designed and we built. So it's, I'll show you in a minute, full of chopped to size birch that we use to burn in the fire pit. I'll give you a photograph of the actual fire pit that I explained a few minutes ago, but this is the setup, basically. I've got, and I'll show pictures, some outdoor thermometers around that show us the temperature. We're currently sitting actually at about 9 degrees here. What we've noticed, and I just put these up a few days ago, is we get about a 8 to 10 degree difference in the temperature outside the fire pit area by the back door of the house, and that we enjoy in here internally. It's enough that when you go to fill up your drink or go to the bathroom or whatever, when you step out, it feels cooler once you step out, so it really does make a difference. Still a lot of air here. I've got a fan up behind me here, just sitting on the sideboard of the smoker that I use, and the fan is there. Basically I just put it on low so we're getting a little bit of breeze coming in, and it'll keep the smoke away from the breathable air, so it really is just dandy. Now the other thing I wanted to talk about just briefly is something that we added over the summer. What was occurring in the summer was we were watching a lot of baseball, and that was nice. And so I said, well, to myself, why not watch baseball outside by the fire pit? Wouldn't that be a nice thing to do? So I again went online on Kijiji, found somebody who was selling a flat screen TV for 60 bucks. It's about a 50-incher, and I then built a little kind of shed for it, and I'll show you a picture of that in more detail in a minute. You can see it here on the screen. The shed initially was basically just 2x2 construction, plywood base, TV fit in there just nicely. The HDMI cable comes out so we can hook in right here, and I bring in the Wi-Fi hub out here and then plug into the HDMI and it feeds the TV. I also have a line coming out for the audio cable from the back of the TV so that I can run it through speakers here, so we have a little more control over the sound, because it's harder to hear the television when it's sealed up in the box there. In the summer, the box had an open front that we could put plastic over once we went inside. When it rained, unless the rain was driving sideways in the wind, no problem at all. Winter came along, though. I'm sitting out here in early January right now at almost 10 degrees. It's lovely for January, early January, but it gets cold. We've had it down to 35 below. And we have been out here at 30 below, although we've gotten a little wise about that, and now we sort of have got a decision that we'll have a fire down to about 15 below. It was quite comfortable, and after that, we have nothing left to prove. So, anyway, it's part of the wise part of Fire Wisdom, I guess. Anyway, so let me tell you about what the winter adjustments were for the television. So the first thing I did was I looked up online to see how warm televisions need to be to work. Turns out flat screen TVs can be stored at down to 20 below, but they can't be run at that temperature. So if you store it that cold, then you have to let it warm up and give it a couple of days to dry out before you try and turn it on. So that wasn't going to be a solution. I didn't feel like carrying it in all the time. And so what I came up with was the idea of taking all the plastic off of the TV box, the shed if you like, and then insulating all of the sides, top down, right, left, and back, with 1.5 inch styrofoam, building supply center stuff. Glued it all together, and then across the front I got a big sheet of 1/8 inch plexiglass, cut it to size, drilled a few holes in around the outside, and screwed it on. But before I put the cover on, in behind the TV in the back left corner, I got one of those little ceramic heaters, 2 settings, low and high, 750 or 1500 watts, and set it on high, put it behind the TV, and then plugged it into a thermostatically controlled power box. And the control for that power box is a little remote that senses the temperature, and then you can set the range at which it turns power on and off on the power unit. And so I set it to turn on at 8 degrees Celsius, so a little bit above freezing, and turn off at 10, so it's a fairly tight range. We don't obviously need it any warmer than that, because actually on a sunny day, even when it's 20 below out, the inside of the TV box gets up to 10, 15, even 20 degrees. And I've seen it up at 30 degrees on some winter days as well. So we need to worry about it when it gets cold only. And the unit so far has done a very good job of keeping it within that sort of range. When it got down to 30 below, there was a couple of nights where I came out and checked when it was 32, 33, 34 below, and it was down around 1 or 2 degrees. But any of the time we were out at 15 below, it sits very nicely in that 8 to 10 degree range. So the system works very nicely. You can see a little garden gnome there. That garden gnome is out in the garden with the zucchinis and the tomatoes and the carrots in the summertime, but it seemed kind of cruel to leave him sitting out there in the wintertime, so we gave him a little scarf and stuck him inside the case. And yes, his name is Mike as well. Anyway, it's the only name that goes around here. So the TV works just fine. It stays out here overnight. We have a remote control to turn the TV on, and then we use the remote control with the Wi-Fi unit to change the channels, and it works just fine. It's useful because we watch a lot of hockey now in the wintertime. I'm a Calgary Flames fan. The other Mike is an Oilers fan. He was working up in Edmonton in the Gretzky heydays. And so we are nice enough about supporting one another's teams and tolerate one another on the few games a year where they're playing against one another. So we don't actually recreate the Battle of Alberta here, but we do notice that we cheer in different directions on those games. Anyway, what else can I tell you about this? I guess all I really need to finish up by saying is this has worked very well, in line with the reason that I started put the fire pit out here and got started a couple of years ago, and that is to push back against winter a little bit. I don't have any deep resentment of winter. I just don't do a lot of winter stuff. I'm not into skiing, snowshoeing, snowboarding, any of that sort of stuff. And so having this as a way of kind of getting out and getting some fresh air and enjoying some hockey and having a nice seasoned birch fire on a regular basis just kind of keeps my spirits buoyed up. And that's also kind of a part of what I have in mind when I think about fire wisdom. So obviously this works here for current purposes. If you are thinking of making some adjustments and putting in a pit in your backyard, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to share your thoughts and hear what you're thinking about. If you have any questions about any of the stuff that I've set up and talked about here, by all means, fire me an email. The email's in the links down below this video. So I will have a couple of pictures that I'll include here at the end also of we got kind of carried away with the Fire Wisdom stuff. So we also have Fire Wisdom hats, Fire Wisdom t-shirts, and even some Fire Wizard buttons. And I'll have a couple of pictures. You'll see them on the screen around me here. And if you're interested in those, I can make them available to you at cost plus shipping. Just send me an email and I'll send you that information. I'm not looking to make a lot of money on those, but it's nice to kind of get the notion of fire wisdom out there and to give more people some things to think about in terms of how they can enjoy fires in their backyard in the middle of a Canadian winter. So, take care.